We saved you a seat right here. Come join us.
Sorry, sir. No tables left. The words landed like a slap as the billionaire CEO stood alone on New Year's Eve, surrounded by laughter that wasn't meant for him, until a single mom slowly stood up and waved. The host did not look at him when she said it. Her eyes stayed on the glowing screen, fingers tapping, already dismissing his presence. The dining room behind her pulsed with warmth, soft lights, polished glass, and voices rising with celebration. Outside, the cold pressed in, sharp and unforgiving. The lonely billionaire CEO stood there in a tailored coat, hands empty, no reservation, no companion, no place to sit as another year closed without mercy. People glanced at him, some recognizing his face, others sensing his status, yet no one moved. His name was Adrian Cole, a man whose signature could move markets and whose silence could freeze rooms. Tonight, none of that mattered. He stood in a line of ordinary people, watching couples laugh, families lean together, and friends raise glasses. The smell of roasted food drifted past him like an insult. He felt smaller than he had in years, stripped of authority by a simple rule that did not bend for wealth. The host repeated herself, softer now, as if kindness might soften the refusal. Fully booked. Adrian nodded once and stepped aside. Within the first moments, it was clear this was not about a table. This was about absence. Adrian's shoulders sagged just enough to show the weight he carried. His eyes scanned the room, not searching for opportunity, but for proof that he still belonged somewhere. New Year's Eve had always been loud in his life, filled with deals and speeches, but never full. Tonight, the emptiness pressed harder than any failure he had known. Adrian had not always been alone. Long before the towers and headlines, he was a young man with calloused hands and a hopeful heart. He grew up in a small house where the kitchen smelled of cheap coffee and warm bread. His father worked long hours and came home tired but present. His mother believed kindness was a form of strength. When illness took them both within a single year, the world lost its color. Adrian learned to survive by building walls made of ambition. He poured himself into work, into numbers and plans that rewarded effort without asking for vulnerability. Each success earned applause but cost connection. Relationships faded under long nights and constant travel. Friends became contacts. Holidays became meetings. Somewhere along the way, he stopped being invited and started being respected instead. Respect, he learned, was quieter and far colder than love. As he aged, the silence grew louder. Penthouse rooms echoed. Celebrations felt staged. On nights like this, memories surfaced uninvited. His mother's laugh, his father's steady presence, the simple joy of sharing a meal. Adrian had tried to buy that feeling back many times, but it never stayed. Tonight, it returned in the cruelest way, standing just beyond a restaurant door he could not enter. Inside the restaurant, at a small table near the window, sat a woman named Mara Lewis. She was a single mom, balancing her world between a plate of pasta and a tired little girl swinging her feet beneath the table. Her coat hung on the back of the chair, worn but clean. Her eyes carried both exhaustion and resolve. She had saved for months to afford this dinner. Wanting to give her daughter one bright memory before the year ended, Mara noticed Adrian before anyone else did. She saw how he stepped aside, how he did not argue or flash status. She saw the loneliness settle over him like frost. Her daughter followed her gaze, curious, innocent. In that moment, Mara felt a familiar ache. She knew what it meant to stand quietly while the world moved on. She had done it many times since her husband passed, carrying grief while smiling for her child. The conflict in the room grew without words. Staff moved quickly. Guests laughed louder, and Adrian stood near the door like an afterthought. No one spoke up. No one offered space. Rules were rules. Silence became complicity. The injustice was subtle, polite, and deeply human. Adrian did not protest. His dignity stayed intact, even as his heart cracked open a little more. Mara's hands tightened around her fork. She felt the weight of a choice forming. She glanced at her daughter, who watched the man with wide eyes. Mara remembered nights when strangers had shown her small kindnesses that felt like lifelines. She remembered how one gesture could steady a shaking soul. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from resolve. Slowly, she stood. The scrape of her chair drew a few glances. Conversations dipped for half a second. Mara raised her hand, palm open, her voice calm and clear. She waved toward Adrian, not grand, not dramatic, just enough to be seen. The gesture cut through the noise like a quiet bell. Heads turned. The host froze. Adrian looked up, surprised, unsure if the moment was real. Mara met his eyes and smiled, simple smile that held no expectation. Her daughter smiled too, mirroring her courage without understanding its weight. The room seemed to hold its breath. In that instant, the power shifted, not through wealth or authority, but through humanity. Adrian hesitated, then stepped forward, guided by something he had nearly forgotten how to trust. The host began to protest, citing policy and fairness, but her words fell flat. The room had already decided. A table could be shared. Space could be made. Rules bent under the quiet force of compassion. Adrian thanked Mara softly, his voice steady but changed. As he sat, he felt warmth return to places long cold. Conversation unfolded slowly. Mara spoke of ordinary things, of school projects and small victories. Adrian listened, truly listened, for the first time in years. He shared pieces of himself without titles or numbers. Time softened around them. The countdown approached, but something more important was happening. Connection was being restored. As midnight neared, others in the room noticed the shift. Laughter grew genuine. Strangers smiled at one another. The energy changed, subtle but undeniable. When the year turned, glasses rose and cheers filled the space. But Adrian's eyes filled with something else. Gratitude, not for success, but for inclusion. One line settled into his mind, heavy with truth. Wealth builds walls, kindness opens doors. Another followed, quieter but stronger. You do not need permission to be human. These thoughts stayed with him long after the night ended. The story did not end at midnight. In the weeks that followed, Adrian's life changed in ways no boardroom strategy could plan. He reached out to people he had forgotten. He invested time, not just money, into lives and causes that mattered. He returned to that restaurant months later, not to be seen, but to remember. Mara returned to her routine, but something had shifted for her too. She saw her daughter carry that night forward, offering kindness without hesitation. She knew she had given her more than a dinner. She had given her an example. On another New Year's Eve, years later, the restaurant filled again with light and laughter. This time, no one stood alone by the door. And if you looked closely, you could see how one quiet wave had rippled outward, changing lives far beyond that single table. Some battles are not fought with words. Some victories are not announced. They arrive softly, carried by people brave enough to stand when others sit in silence. If this story moved you, share where you are watching from and what it made you feel. Subscribe for more stories that honor quiet courage, unseen strength, and the moments that remind us we all belong somewhere. Asterisk.